1 Samuel 15 is about how God rejects Saul as king. Saul was the king. And God told him to completely annihilate the enemy. God gave him instructions. See, there was a time when Saul was listening to God. You can compare the kingdom of Saul with the kingdom of David, but don't be mistaken. Saul did not have everything evil about him. He started out having some good characteristics, but the Bible tells us there in 1 Samuel 15 that he did not follow completely, everybody say completely, God's instruction. Now listen to me, because obedience is only obedience when it's complete obedience. Can I say it again? Obedience is only obedience when it's complete obedience. To put it another way, let me say it like this. Partial obedience is disobedience. Y'all ain't amening me now. I'm going to say it again. Obedience is only obedience when it's complete obedience. And partial obedience is disobedience, because God doesn't want you to do a couple of things that He gives you and then pat yourself on the back and act like you have everything right in His eyes. See, most Christians, that's the way we do. He gives us instruction, and we follow 3/4 of it, and we pat ourselves on the back and act like we deserve a bozo button. But God says obedience is only obedience if it's complete obedience. I'm not looking for you to do 5 out of the 6. I'm not looking for you to do 90%, because complete obedience is doing everything that I've asked. It's not partial in its nature. And God told them, when you go into the enemy's camp, He said, I want you to destroy the bad things, but I also want you to destroy the good things. And you know what happened? The people started speaking in Saul's ear. You know what they said? They said, man, why would you do that? There's too many good things here. Let's not destroy it. We can use it for good reasons and good purpose. And you know, let's just destroy the bad stuff and let's take the good stuff. But that ain't what God said. Now, it might make sense in your natural self. I mean, think about it. If you don't have a lot, okay, then you might think to yourself, why destroy the good stuff? But the thing was with Saul, he had a lot of good things. He allowed greed to creep in. It wasn't that he didn't have anything. It was that he was seeking the approval of man. You want to know why God rejected Saul as king? It had to do with one thing. He feared man more than he feared God. The Bible said in verse 24, and Saul said unto Samuel, Saul said it, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and thy words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. You want to know why God removed him? Because he didn't have an unequivocal fear of God. He had an unequivocal fear of man. See, God is not going to allow people to stay in position that are controlled by man and that have a fear of what other people will think. As a matter of fact, let me be honest with you. I don't think you ought to listen to anybody. I don't care if they're on radio and TV. I don't care who they are. I don't care how long they've been around. I don't believe you ought to allow anybody, get ready, it's going to be strong, allow them to speak into your life if they have a greater fear of man than they do of God. And you can tell by the pitiful, puny preaching that comes from the pulpits of the preachers in America, they have a greater fear of what others will think than they have a fear of telling the truth and standing before God. 2 Samuel 15 is about Absalom's rebellion. Absalom was David's son. Absalom, the son, conspired against his father David. And David fled because the heart of the people was with Absalom. Wow. See, whenever a leader, listen to me, whenever a leader feels like the heart of the people is not with them, then that leader, because he loves the people, feels it's best to leave the people to another leader. Getting quiet. An Absalom spirit is rooted in impressing and stealing the hearts of people who are under the authority of another. They want to dethrone somebody. That's really what an Absalom spirit is wanting to do. That may not be what they say they're doing, but in the long run, that is what they're doing. They're trying to dethrone somebody in authority. We'll talk more about an Absalom spirit at another time, but don't forget that in 2 Samuel 15, that Absalom's rebellion caused David to flee because Absalom went and did everything he could to get the heart of the people to support him and not his father David. David didn't feel like he should go have to call people and invite them to their own church. David didn't feel like he had to go out and pet everybody. He felt like he had done enough to earn their respect and their trust and their support, and that was it. And Absalom understood a principle that relationship equals influence. 1 Kings 15 is all about the reign of a king by the name of Asa, A-S-A. He was the great-grandson of Solomon, and he was a good king who followed in the same heart as David. And one of the things that Asa did as king was, listen to me, he banished perverted people from the land. So if they were perverted, he banished them from the land. Any perversion, he said, you can go live anywhere, but you can't live here. Another thing he did was he removed, this is what the Bible said in 1 Kings, he removed his grandmother from being the queen mother of the land because she made an obscene image. And he said, I'm more loyal to God than I'm my grandmother. You all can look up at me. Some of you looking down, ain't even got paper you're writing on. You know what he did? He said, you know what? I'm more loyal to God than I am my blood relatives. Don't mean I don't love you. Don't mean I don't like you. But I'm more loyal to God than I am you. And his grandmother was the queen mother of the land. And he said, now that I'm king, I love you, Granny, but you're not the queen mother any longer. As long as I'm king, you got to go. Is anybody listening? He said, I'm not going to put up with you making obscene images that do not glorify God. And I want you to know that as much as I love you, I love God more than I love you. And I've got to choose God over my family. Now, how would that work in your neighborhood? Some of you get knocked upside the head with a frying pan with your grandma. You did that, they say, what you thinking, fool? But he had enough guts, enough tenacity, enough love for God to make a decision. Unlike Saul, to say, God is number one and everything else has to fall into line. 2 Kings 15 is about the dangers of prosperity. You know, if the devil can't get you by knocking you down, he doesn't mind lifting you up in order to take you down either. Listen to me when I say this, because a lot of people think the devil's just going to take us down and make us miserable. But the devil doesn't mind allowing you to be promoted if that promotion is going to ultimately bring you down. Sometimes people get a promotion on the job, takes them away from family, takes them away from church, takes them away from responsibilities. They think it must be God because I make more money. But if it takes you away from your relationship with God, money is not worth. The Bible talks in 2 Kings 15 about a man by the name of Uzziah whose prosperity led him to pride, presumption, and ultimately his own personal destruction. Let me tell you something. Sometimes you got to be more careful with the more you get than with the less you have. Some of you think, well, I'm poor, I ain't got nothing to lose. But when you get it, you better learn how to protect it and keep it and not allow things to get the best of you. See, God isn't against you having things, but He is against things having you. I mean, what do you allow to rule you? What things do you allow to master you? What things do you allow to control your life? God doesn't want us to be materialistic people. He's not against us having material things, but He doesn't want us to be materialistic. He wants us to understand that all we have has been given to us by Him, and if He requires it back, we are submitted, humble, and yielded to give Him everything, because ultimately it's His anyway. 1 Chronicles 15. It's an awesome chapter in the Bible, and it's referring to how David brought the ark back to Jerusalem. Anybody ready to bring some things back and to recover some things that have been stolen? The ark was gone. The temple wasn't the same. You can have all the finest things to adorn a building, but if the Spirit of God is not inside, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is on the outside. Can I get an amen? There's a lot of places where Ichabod has been written on the doors of a church, and David said there's something that's missing in this house because the ark is not here. It's gone, it's been taken, it's been stolen, and I'm going to do whatever I got to do, including giving my life in order to get the presence of God back. David went and he recaptured it, and he was happy. I mean, some of us, if you lose keys and find it, get excited. Some of us get more excited than a soul that's lost, that gets found. Anybody ever lose keys and it's the end of the world? Seriously, have you ever lost your keys? If you lost your keys, you talk about empty, lonely, isolated. It's just a key, but oh my God, it's your car and you can't get in. Hello? And it's like, even if they're not, everybody's looking at you, talking about you, calling friends on the phone and saying, some idiot liked their keys in the car. Even if they don't, you feel like that, right? David lost something more precious than keys. He lost the presence of God. And when he recaptured it, he was excited. The Bible said when he came home, he was dancing so much, his clothes was coming off. He was spinning and rejoicing, giving God glory. He came back away from his wife for a period of time, lonely, probably missed her. He comes back, expecting a, hey, baby, how you doing? Come on up here, give me a hug and a kiss. And his wife looks down and mocks him. His wife was mad and cursed and criticized because of his excessive celebration. And the Bible said that because she cursed what God has blessed, she was struck with barrenness all the days of her life. Because God did not want her to reproduce after her kind, because she despised what God valued. Can I tell you, you better be careful about despising the things God values. Even when you don't understand the things of God, be careful about criticizing them. Just because you don't understand people dancing, praising, speaking in tongues, getting a little happy, be careful about running your mouth and criticizing them, because you might end up like David's wife and not have the ability to reproduce again in your life. 2 Chronicles 15 is about revival and reform in Judah. Read 2 Chronicles 15. It's an awesome chapter. I believe that just as God released revival and reformation there in Judah, God wants to release revival and reformation in our lives in 2015. Job 15 is all about the condemnation of a so-called friend. Job had it all. Job lost it all. But he had 3 friends. Job 15 is about how his friends criticized him and blamed him for what he lost. With friends like that, you don't need enemies. I mean, if your Christian friends blame you for being sick, blame you for losing your support of your wife, blame you for your kids dying, blame you for losing everything, what kind of friend is that? I mean, shouldn't a friend be there to support, lift you up, raise your hands, help encourage you through troubled times? Isn't that what a friend should attempt to do? Not Job's friends. They condemned Job, saying that he was getting what he deserved because he must have had some secret sin in his life. Wow, it's hard to serve people. It's hard to be friends with people when all they want to do is condemn and criticize and blame you for what has happened to you in a negative way. Psalm 15 is about attracting the attention of God. It gives you the criteria for attracting the attention of God. Proverbs 15 is interesting in that it will tell you how to handle an argument. Anybody here ever argue with people? Anybody here ever argue with God? 3 of you. The rest of you got an issue with lying. How many of you have arguments with people? Okay? Some of you didn't hear a word I said, but you're going to go home and read Proverbs 15 because that's all you've been doing is arguing. Now you won't like Proverbs 15, I'm going to tell you in advance. Proverbs 15 is not for the faint at heart. Proverbs 15 is not for the immature because Proverbs 15 puts the onus, puts the responsibility of an argument not upon the other, but upon you. Doesn't that stink? Don't you hate it when you fight, you want God to agree with you? You want God to say, you're right, hold your ground, don't forgive, make them apologize, make them do what you want to manipulate them. Proverbs 15 is all about one thing. It's all about taking the responsibility for your part in that argument, and instead of talking, listening. And how many of you know it's pretty hard the madder you get to listen? Can I get a witness? I promise you, the more mad you get, the more you talk, the more you respond, the more you react. There's nobody who gets mad and closes. We want to express our side. We want to defend our case. We want to be heard. Thank you for that one hand clap. I appreciate that. Isaiah 15 is about the burden of Moab. Anybody got a burden on your life that doesn't seem to go away? Anybody here had a long time burden that's been on your back? Had a monkey on your back? Isaiah 15 is about the burden of Moab. And now Isaiah, the prophet of God, had to deal with the burden of Moab on a continually, daily, monthly, yearly basis. Anything in your life ever nagged you long term and you couldn't seem to get rid of it? It wouldn't go away. Anybody had a burden and you begged God like Paul did to take that thorn in the flesh away, and yet God said, my grace is sufficient. Paul, that we know, begged 3 times, please take it, please take it, please take it. And every time God came back and declared to Paul, my grace is sufficient. In other words, don't worry about me taking it out. Learn how to live with it and have victory over it in your life. There's only 2 more Old Testament books that have a chapter 15, so let's finish. Jeremiah 15 is all about the Lord's anger with Judah and the Lord's assurance to Jeremiah that everything's going to be all right. The Lord got mad with his people. It wasn't the first time, and it certainly wasn't the last. That God got mad with his people because they were not following his instruction. And listen to what God said to Jeremiah in Jeremiah 15. He said, just because the people are not walking in obedience to your words doesn't mean I'm going to hold you back from fulfilling my destiny in your life. In Ezekiel 15, it's the last book of the Bible that has a chapter 15 in the Old Testament. We'll next start looking at the New Testament, chapter 15. How many of you enjoyed it so far? Ezekiel 15 is the last book of the Old Testament that has a chapter 15 in it. That last book, Ezekiel, that has a chapter 15, is all about how the useless vines will be destroyed. If you're a vine on a tree but you're useless, you're not willing to be pliable, you're not willing to be used, you're not willing to allow God to direct your footsteps, God said, I'm going to destroy the unusable things. Those prideful things, those haughty things, those things that are unwilling to be placed and put in my hands so I can mold them, God said, I'm going to get rid of them.